Good morning, everyone. Make and keep. Make and keep. What are we making and keeping? I'm going to unfold that in just a moment. I was going to say review from last week, but I wasn't here. I was in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I was there presiding over the marriage of one of my first cousins. So I was telling somebody that I was going to go and how it was going to be great to be back at my baptismal church and see all my family and stuff and kind of tell them what I was going to do, but I kind of chose the wrong words. I said, I'm going home this weekend to marry my cousin. Should have chose a different way, okay? But I did indeed get to preside over that ceremony, and it was wonderful. So not only was my cousin, but she was also my godchild. So it was beautiful to see and wish them well, Victor and Jen, as they start their married life together. Make and keep. Make and keep what? Make and keep God a priority in our life. So very challenging to do. First, really to have that profound encounter with Christ and make him a priority, and then to keep him there. And yet we see in this first reading how it's talking about wisdom, okay, or I should say it was the book of wisdom was talking about how one can have wisdom in one's life. And certainly we have the natural light of reason. And there's something particular about Catholicism is that it's one of the few, if not the only religion that lifts up the fact that there's a congruency between faith and reason. Things aren't wrong because God says so. They're wrong because they don't produce human flourishing. Virtue is a continual habit of choosing the good. Freedom is the ability to choose the good. Where I come to this situation, I know what's going to happen if I choose this. And yet I know if I make this sacrifice and I go down this path, order, peace, joy, fulfillment, and yet there's still that draw. Freedom finally comes when we've made that habit over and over and over again, that good choice, that now I come to this decision and I don't even think twice about the wrong path. I just go down the path of God's greatness. But how do we unfold that? Pope John Paul II wrote an encyclical, Fideis et Ratio, or Faith and Reason. There he said that they are like wings, the wing of faith and the wing of reason, and only through both can you ascend to the heights of truth. So it's so important that we're using both. And essentially that's what that first reading says. And then we hear Jesus unfolding his call to discipleship and also how to advance down the path of greatness. He says, now he's using hyperbole, and it definitely worked. I mean, just hearing my own voice saying those words. If you don't hate your mother or father, wife, husband, children, if you don't hate everybody, then you can't be my disciple. What's he saying there? Is he saying that we literally hate? No. What he is saying is that if you really want to love your mother, your father, your wife, your husband, your child, your friend, the world, if you really want to love, put God first. Because if we put another relationship before him, we will never come to the heights of loving that person. Kind of ends with another hyperbole. If you don't renounce all of your possessions, then you can't be my disciple. Well, obviously we can't do that. No one would have anything. But what he is saying is that you cannot be possessed by your possessions. You will not put me first. You will not have that order. You will not have that freedom. Here's a litmus test. straight from the scriptures. Tithing. Everything that we have is God's. There are some that we have that we participated in that hard work, using the will that God gave us, the intellect that God gave us, so all of it is God's, and some of it is ours, but we have it. Live on 90%. Oh, you're just trying to get money for the church, Father. I didn't say give it all to the church. You can give a percentage of it. I mean, we got to keep the lights on, but give it to a charity. How many needs are out there? Can we live on 90% of the 100% that God gives us? Or are we possessed by our possessions? Remember, 80% of the world lives on $10 a day or less. 80% of the world lives on $10 a day or less. We're all rich. How do we do this? How do we put God first, and how do we keep him there? This week we celebrated the memorial of Saint Teresa of Calcutta, and she had an amazing way of doing this, and she put it in this little cascade. The fruit of silence is prayer. The fruit of prayer is faith. The fruit of faith is love. The fruit of love is service. The fruit of service is peace. Starts with silence, and it ends with peace in keeping God first. Silence is something that we all struggle with, I'm sure. I mean, I don't have anybody else in the rectory, and yet still I struggle to take the time, to make the time for silence in God. So very often I will wake up, and first thing I'll do, got that phone in my hand, checking the schedule, looking what's next. Silence. It's one of the reasons why we have the Adoration Chapel. 36 hours, absolute silence in there. It's a place where we can go. But when we create silence, and we're made for this, we're made for God, we will begin to lean towards him. And there will be a conversation. And when we have a conversation with God in prayer, it stirs our faith. So the silence is the prayer and the connection with God. That connection with God will stir the gift of faith that you and I received in our baptism. Remember, faith is a supernatural capacity to know God. And so we create this silence that impels us to lean forward towards him. And it starts a conversation which stirs the supernatural capacity of faith within us. That opens us to love the way that God does. And when we find ourselves now inspired by divine love, then we serve. And not only do we serve, but we serve in a way that really costs us something. Mother Teresa also had mentioned that a real sacrifice is something that brings about a true cost for us, a personal cost. And our time, our effort. No, the fruit of service is peace. Think about an instance where in your life you knew what the right thing to do was, and it was going to come at a great sacrifice to you personally. You knew somehow, both in reason and in faith, that this was the right thing to do. It came at a great cost, but you chose to do it. And at the end of the day, there was a peace that could not be taken from you. And there's the wisdom to make him a priority and to keep him a priority. It starts with silence and it ends with peace.